Welcome back to the Everything Property podcast. Now, one strategy an investor can utilize to build wealth is to do so by rent vesting. Rent vesting is in practice renting where you want to live and buying in markets you can afford, and that you target using property data and fundamentals. For families, singles, and everyday Australians, renting is also a way of life, especially with property prices growing through pandemics, growing overnight. Let alone the hike in interest rates we've had over the last 12 months, sprinkling a little bit of inflation, etc., etc., etc. You get the point. Now, securing a rental is often overlooked and not spoken about, but for the past few years, we've had vacancy rates at record lows. We've had 454,000 people net overseas migration rate in 2023, and with no foreseeable fix in our housing supply market. Sometimes to secure a rental, you need a little bit of magic. Sometimes you need a special little touch. Sometimes you just need the rent fairy. Sarah Elkordi, welcome to the Everything Property podcast. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm well, thank you.
Thanks for coming on. The reason that we got you on, I think your business is sort of like a unicorn, and one I think is very special. So I want to talk today about the rent fairy and how you got to be and how that operates. But I think first tell us about the property management days. So you were a property manager before starting your business.
Yeah.
How did you find that?
I started as a BDM in Cogra, and then I was a little bit bored in that position. So I ventured into the property management side of real estate. I stayed in it for about 9 years. I started in the south, and then I ended up in the inner west in Erskineville. It's my last property management role that I worked in. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved servicing the landlords and the tenants at the time. And it was a challenging task. The challenging task day to day what made it fun and enjoyable. And then I ventured out of that in 2019.
Okay, so you're a property manager for about, 9 years?
About 9 years, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time in the field. I feel like property managers don't get paid for the amount of shit that they have to put up with.
No, there was barely any recognition. You were very lucky to get a thank you or really anything. There was barely any Christmas gifts at the time. It wasn't a very recognised gig at all, but it was one that was quite rewarding in yourself when you were able to service the tenants and service the landlords and make them happy.
Okay, and what prompted you to make that first start, like out of uni and probably all the other sort of jobs and stuff you had? Why sort of go into property management, and why go into real estate or the property industry?
So a bit off track, I went after school. I actually went to university and did my diploma of social science.
Yep.
And then started my bachelor of criminology with hopes to somehow go into the police force. And then there was a little opportunity to go in and do some BDM work in Cogra to make some extra cash on the side while I was at university. Fell in love with the property side of things, and then ended up leaving university and going straight into real estate.
How many years into your degree did
I
you?
was a year and a half into
Year and a
it.
half
But
in
I
you?
was never a big studier.
Yeah,
I did well in school, obviously, but I didn't enjoy the study side of things. And then once I got that kind of, leg out the door, and I was able to go into something else that I knew that I would enjoy, I was straight out.
What did your family and friends say?
Well, Mum was a bit worried.
Yeah,
of
because
course.
quitting a university degree is probably something people think about daily.
Yes. So I did put it on hold. I deferred it for a year, and then I deferred it again. And even if I want to go back tomorrow, I'm still able to go back tomorrow. Yeah. But it's obviously not something I'm doing now because I've got the rent fairy.
Through your property management career, your 9 years, you've seen markets, you've seen cycles. You get a really good mix of each of different areas, so Erskineville and in around Cogra and stuff like that. Then we get into sort of 2019, and maybe it started beforehand, but what's your trigger to get you to, have you had enough of property management by that hand? COVID coming up, where's the sort of line in the sand where this sort of pipeline thought and dream becomes a reality?
Yeah.
Tell me.
So I remember quite distinctively sitting in a car with a friend at the time, and I said, I'm struggling to see how there are so many people at these open homes, and I have to make the hard call of sending out, or the call or the email of sending out 50 to 100 people saying, sorry, you've been unsuccessful, and only getting to say to one person you've been successful. And then all those people that would come through an open home, we would have no contact with again unless we saw them again at an open home. We wouldn't give them any feedback on their application. We wouldn't tell them, well, sorry, you didn't get it because you were lacking information, or your reference didn't call, or whatever reason they didn't get approved, because landlords don't have to give reasons to tenants to why they've been declined. And I sat in the car and I said, wouldn't it be nice if somebody was actually able to help the tenants? This would have been 2015.
Wow.
And then I was still in my career, and obviously I didn't have the capacity to go ahead and start that. I didn't really know where to start. I'd never been in business. I was always working for companies in real estate. And then I would take notes, write things on how I would run the company, what I would do, just in a little notebook. It was just something very sacred between me. And anything that I would come up with, sometimes you're lying in bed, it's midnight, you have an idea, you pop it down on your notes in your phone or your paper, your notepad. And then it wasn't until May 2019, I took maternity leave, and I was like, okay, it wasn't in my mind at all to start. I was focused on my son being on maternity leave.
Yep.
I actually became a single mum when my son was 4 months old, so moved back home with mum, was still doing mum life, but then I thought, okay, I have to decide whether I go back to a full-time job, and I put my son, who was 8 months at the time, back into daycare, because obviously you need money. And do I put him into daycare, or do I sit down, figure out how to start this business while I'm on maternity leave and see how it goes? Mm-hmm. So really it was a risk, but I thought, well, if I'm going to take a risk, the time is going to be now, because I have the backing of my family. I had a little bit of funds behind me to just support myself until it really got to the 12-month mark. And then when my son was 10 months old, I launched the Rent Fairy, so a friend helped me do the logo at the time. Obviously, I didn't have funds behind me, so my sister and I made our own website. My fees were incredibly low at the time because I didn't know any different.
Yep.
There was no real business model where I could just be like, oh, I'm going to do this, let me copy it, or a guide. It was like, okay, I'm starting a business from scratch that's never been done. How am I going to do it? Because we're not like relocation agents. We are so much more in depth and in detail in what we do. So then I launched on the 4th of June 2020, and the rest is like history now.
You did mention business model, so I think we want to. Everyone's probably thinking, what is the Rent Fairy and how it works? So, can you run me through a quick explainer about the Rent Fairy and what's the business model? How does it work?
Yeah, so essentially the best way that I describe it is think about it as having a personal assistant who takes over the whole process of securing your rental property anywhere in Australia. So we do things like search and source properties. We do the application side of things. So we'll review applications, go through and see if there's anything that's missing or needs to be added into your application, or any questions that we need answered, so we can then go to the agent and make sure we know about your circumstances. And then we also go out and inspect properties on their behalf if they're not in Australia or they're not in the state that they need to be in, or that they're looking to move into. So it's the process that someone would normally do themselves, taken over, accelerated, and done at the highest standard every single time.
And what I really like about it, two things. One is that you've been a property manager for such a long amount of time. You know what you're looking at, you know what you're looking for. So it's not as if you're winging it and you're guessing it. But two as well is, who are you paid by for that service?
So the tenant pays a one-off fee directly to the Rent Fairy, and then we work with them until they secure a home. So there's no time limit, because we understand the rental market. We understand it's hard to say, it'll take 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 months. We don't have a time limit in how long we work with you. We work with them until they secure a home that they're happy to go ahead with.
Wow, perfect.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to ask about that and to sort of put that out there, because a lot of people would be thinking, are you working for the leasing agent? Are you working for the real estate agent? But in this instance, you're working for the tenant, and you work for them as long as possible until they find their rental. I've got a heap of questions.
Yeah.
One of them, you said people out of state. I think I've heard a couple of stories, but is there anyone that you've placed from outside Australia coming in? Tell me about them.
I do lots of international moves. So a lot of the time, I've moved thousands from New Zealand who come over here for work.
Yep.
We've done UK, Ethiopia. When I
Ethiopia?
when I had a call from Ethiopia, I was like, surely this is like a spam. But I answer because we do international. So it was Ethiopia. We moved them to Guildford in New South Wales. We collected keys. We met them at they were in temporary accommodation they went into. We met them. We dropped off the keys. We did the ingoing condition report. Dubai. We've done Spain, Germany. I've got one at the moment that's Germany. He's just landed in actually Sydney today to pick up his keys. And then it's literally everywhere. But I do state to state as well. And then I do suburb to suburb. So it's really anywhere anyone and anywhere that you are. If you need to move anywhere into Australia, I can move you into it.
Okay. And then, so the process would be they come across your website, services, video, anything like that. Is it just an inquiry form? You sit down for a meeting or a phone call? How do we sort of draw out the process from time it takes to me to say, hey, I'm looking for a rental, to getting into something?
Of course. So it's a online inquiry form through our website.
Yep.
Automatically in their inbox, you'll get our price guide, welcome pack, and a bit of information about us, with also a link to book in a time to have a chat with me, which is across a 5-day week. And if obviously they're international, they just send an email and we work out a time. I do it after hours, before school drop off, or whatever it is that we need to do. And then there's an initial consultation where we make sure that we are a good fit to work together. We go through things like living history, employment, because one thing that's really important is that they do have some source of income moving into Australia, and if they don't, that they have savings behind them. It's just things that these landlords are looking at. And then by the time we onboard them, from that call, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours. It depends on how long they take to do terms and conditions and payment. And then we start the process of collecting their criteria, their rental information, their documents. And then it all works in a way where there's one particular staff member who will do the search, so they'll get straight onto the search. Another one is then putting their applications together, and then myself and other team members are speaking to agents straight away to book in inspections. So it's quite a prompt process. But turnaround time, it's hard to say. It's based off a few factors, but our average at the moment is about 2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks on finding a rental. That's actually not too bad.
Well, when you're the rent fairy.
There's a bit of magic in that.
Yeah.
Perfect. So how are you guys taking the suggestions? I imagine if someone's coming over from Ethiopia or USA, they don't really know much about Sydney and each of the suburbs, because if I tell you, there's differences between Bondi to Guildford, to Penrith to Campbelltown, there's a lot of different suburbs. So how much of your work is about sort of educate, like, do you tell them about the suburbs and where they could live?
Absolutely.
Or like, how do you?
We go off based, so in the initial consultation, we have a chat about their desired home, their budget as well. I think budget plays a big part in it. Part of my role as your tenants agent is to make sure that your criteria is realistic. There is nothing worse than someone coming to me and saying, hey, I want a 3-bedroom house in Bondi, but I want it for $500. I'm not going to I can't, because I'm not going to be able to achieve that. So we need to make sure that our clients' criteria is realistic and that they are aware of what they can achieve and where they can achieve that. And that accounts for every state. So in that initial phone conversation, we'll have a chat about their criteria, their budget, what kind of lifestyle they would like. Some people will already have done that research, because majority of the time, or half of the time, people come to me when they're at their wit's end and they're like, we've been trying, but now we can't do it. We're ready to pay a fee. Let's get the ball rolling. So we will definitely go through with them and let them know where is best suited for them based off, what they're trying to achieve with a lifestyle in Sydney and what they can afford.
Okay, that seems realistic, and I feel like that would be a little bit of a challenge sometimes to correct their expectations. Then talk to me. We've got the brief. We're signed up. You've got the package ready. Open homes. Are you doing these in private inspections, or are you going through with the other 100 people?
However I can get in there, I will get in there.
Okay.
So I have team members, including myself, who are all over Australia, who will go out and inspect the properties. We take detailed videos of the property, we give feedback, and we send it through to the client.
If it's a local Australian-based client, are they coming with you, or you guys are doing the first one?
No,
or?
So there's different ways in which you can do it. So if they're, majority of the time, if the client is overseas, myself and my team members will go out and inspect. If it's more of a suburb to suburb, depending on the client's availability, we will either go or they will go and inspect it. I always encourage my clients to inspect the properties themselves. 10 seconds and you know if it's for you or not. You walk in, by the time you get through to the living room, the kitchen or the bathroom, you'll know whether you want to live there or not. It's harder to decide in a video, and that's why when we do our videos, we do them quite thorough, because we become your eyes, ears, nose. If we can smell damp, we're going to let you know. If there's cracks in the wall, we're going to let you know. If there's signs of mold, we're going to let you know. So it's important that I do my job to make sure that when the clients view the videos, we're not just showing them the good parts. We need to show them the bad parts, or the damages,
3Ds.
or which won't be shown by an agent. They're not going to put on the ad that, oh yes, it comes with mold on the bathroom, or it doesn't fit a single bed. Sometimes the rooms are tiny, or you go in and it's dark and it's, And we always look for in inspections is the 3 Ds, and it's dirty, damp, and dark. And if it comes up dirty, it comes up dark, unless you're like a shift worker and you want a dark house, it's going to lead to the 4th D, which we say is depression, because there's nothing worse than a dirty, damp, dark house.
Very true. It's a funny way you put it. Okay, and then how are you? Is you guys just submitting the application the same way everyone else is then, or are you talking to the agent to sort of prep them up and let them know a little bit about the rent ferry?
Yeah, we have lots of relationships with agents already. So we're able to, once we see the listing and we know our client's going through, we'll give them a call and say, hey, hey, Bob, we've got our client coming through this inspection today, named Sarah. Any chance we can get an application through before inspection? If they say, yep, great, we apply, then the breakdown email, and then the back end of it all starts to work, where we have those conversations with the agent. We make them aware of who our client is, what they do for work, if they have any pets, kids, anything that's worth noting. And then they go through and inspect, or we go through and inspect, and then it's another conversation about, great, we've inspected, let's go ahead. In some circumstances where we can't pre-apply for a property, that's all done after we've inspected. Okay,
and talk to me about the inspections. Surely you've had some. What's been the best and worst thing you've seen at an inspection?
The worst thing I have seen is where the property is literally covered in mold and it's still shown. Like, I'm talking like it is like mushroom mold on the bathroom ceiling and it hasn't been cleaned and the property is still open. Another one was where it smelt like feces and wet dog, and the floorboards were all wet. And
where are these areas?
Believe it or not, these are the inner west.
Yeah, okay.
They're the inner west.
There's not a lot of sunlight in the inner west and the terraces and the
majority of them are the terraces, and they are just not maintained. And they're asking for some pretty exceptional rent for what they're looking for. And then it's like the photos online look immaculate. They look beautiful. It looks like the sun is shining through, and the walls are white, and you can fit a king bed and a lounge room in your bedroom. But you go through and you're like, hold on, I've got to check the listing. Did I come to the right place? And mind you, you're waiting in a line for there's 50 people in front of you. And everybody walks in and walks out saying, what the hell was that?
How are you seeing the lines and the demand at the moment?
Crazy. We went to a property in Kensington, a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1-car space. Easy, over 80 groups through.
Unit?
700 a week. 800 a week.
800 a week for a 1-bedder in Kensington?
Yes, I made a TikTok about this the other day. I could not believe it. It's a 1-bedroom in Kensington.
What?
It has parking, which is great for Kensington. But $800 a week, and the line was like, we waited in the car for it to die down. It was like around, like inside.
Was it off Anzac Parade?
I think it was. I can't remember what street it was.
Okay, because you got the tram running.
No, it was off. It was off. Okay. Anzac. It was off Anzac Parade because we could park on the street as well. Okay. You parked right outside, and I just looked at it and I said, "What is going on?" But this is the same thing Australia-wide. You go in Perth and the lines are down the street. You go to Queensland, Brisbane. You go to Hervey Bay. They're all the exact same. It's nowhere. I don't feel that anywhere is doing better than anywhere else. The demand is still so high, and there's people coming in that need houses.
Yeah, there's the as I said in the intro, the net overseas migration figure was like 450,000, and you hear the government and how many houses we're trying to build.
But by the time they build them, it's not quick enough.
This is why I think that's why I think your business and the model that you have is really important and really valuable, and it's something for the listeners to have a listen to and think about, because I do hear people all the time complain about rentals and circumstances like that. I'm like, what is going on?
I could be out at dinner and it's just a casual dinner with some friends, and the table next to us would be talking about, I didn't get accepted for the rental property. And part of me wants to be let
the
me
business
help
card.
You. Let me help you. But I don't, because I feel like sometimes it's a sensitive topic as well. There's people who are about to become homeless and they call me and they say, Sarah, I've got to be out of the house in 3 days. What do? I'm going to be homeless. And then we have to have that tough discussion about, okay, well, you've got to go and stay with a friend, or you have to get some sort of temporary accommodation. And sometimes people end up in tribunal. It's not at any fault at their own. It's like, for example, we had one, because we also help with tribunal. We also help with tribunal. We do the ingoing inspection reports. There's a few other things that we can help with.
Yep.
And there was one client where the landlord wanted to sell, but they gave them 30 days fixed term, end of term notice. So they had 30 days to get out. Yeah. 30 days is not a long time in a rental market to find a new house, to pack up, to find a new house, to move, to get a start date on your new lease that lines up with it is very difficult. They ended up in tribunal because they had to ask for a time to stay past their end of lease.
End of the lease, yep.
And they ended up getting just an extra 2 weeks. And luckily we were able to get them out into something in the last week of their lease. But it's such a stressful time. And people tend to shut down in these circumstances.
I was going to ask you, though, because, like, the example that you had where the lady was like, I've got 3 days left. Is that because they're once they're hit with that notice, they're trying and they have nothing all the way up until the last 3 days, then they contact you?
Yeah,
Or, like,
so
I feel like 3 days ago, you're leaving it
so
late.
Sometimes what will happen is a lot of my company runs off word of mouth. We don't do much marketing at all. So majority of the time, people will try. They're not aware of us. They'll try, and then they'll have a conversation with someone after they've had a breakdown about it, or they'll put a post on Facebook, and then someone will say, try the rent fairy, and then they find out about the rent fairy, and then the pressure goes from them to us, which is completely fine. We're here to relieve that stress. I mean, our slogan is take a seat, rest your feet, let us find your new street. So that's what we're here to do. So
quality.
Part of my role is to also then calm the client down, let them know of their rights, because people aren't aware of their tenancy rights. They're not aware of what they can do when they're in that situation. And I think knowledge on the Residential Tenancies Act is something people should familiarise themselves with when they enter a tenancy. So you're aware of, okay, if I want to break my lease, this is my fee. If I need to go to tribunal for whatever reason, this is what I can do. Or this is what I'm allowed to do in a rental property. There are still some grey areas, but just being familiar with that will put you at ease when you are served with a termination notice. Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but do you know any of them off the top of your head for, say, New South Wales?
Any what, sorry?
Any of the legislation. So for a landlord kicking out a tenant, for example, how much notice does the landlord need to give the tenant?
If it's a breach of tenancy,
no, if it's end of
lease
Yep.
is 30 days notice.
Yep.
But New South Wales is a 30 days end of fixed term. And then if it's after the lease has expired,
month to month.
It's month to month. That is 90 days notice.
And what about if it's a breach of tenancy?
It's a breach of tenancy. It's 2 weeks, but it depends what type of breach it is and if the breach can be rectified.
Okay, so like what, smoking or
so like a rental arrears one, for example. You're 2 weeks in rental arrears. If the agent's on the ball on that 2 week mark, you're going to get an eviction notice, a termination notice to terminate for rental arrears. If you end up in tribunal and you rectify the rental arrears, that can be brought back and taken away. But if you continue on, then you will need to leave. Or, for example, having a pet that's not accepted on a...
do you do pets as well?
Yes,
in your application? Okay.
Yes. We do pet resumes. So I know, but let me tell
No.
you, we do pet resumes.
This is cute.
So it's like a resume that you're going for a job, but it's not about you, it's about your dog. So I asked them to tell me everything about their animal. I want to know the age. I want to know what he likes to do for fun. I want to know where he hangs out during the day. I want to know everything about your dog. We get photos. We make a cute little pet resume. And then we put that in the application. It's important for landlords to visually see the animal. If a landlord has had a bad experience with a pet, they are going to automatically say, no, I don't want a dog. I don't want a cat. I don't want a rabbit. I don't want anything. But if they are able to actually see the cute little cavoodle that's on the pet resume, we might be able to persuade them. So even with the properties that say strictly no pets or no pets, we're calling the agent, hey, we've got a toy poodle or we've got a Labrador. It doesn't stay in the property alone. Can the landlord consider? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's just a phone call and it's a confirmation of whether we can or not. Where we would rather be told no 100 times to no pet properties than potentially miss out on a great property for our client.
Okay. Talk to me about a little bit, one of my questions that I always have that I don't really know the answer to, but what can they ask for in terms of supporting documents? Because there's places that ask for proof of funds, bank accounts, that kind of stuff, and a lot of people aren't comfortable sharing that.
I say it's everything except what colour underwear you're wearing. We need to know everything.
Okay.
Like, it's pretty intense, and some people don't want to. So the way that I approach the people who aren't comfortable with providing full bank statements and everything is, okay, what we need to do here is prove that you have your income coming into your bank account under your name. So we would get them to then print out a statement that just has their income going in, not what's going out or what they're spending their money on. So, for example, on CommBank or St. George Bank, you would do the custom statement where you'd search for your income, download a statement, put that in your application. If you're comfortable doing your last 3 months of statements, but you just don't want your BSB and account number, for example, we would black out the BSB and account number and still put that in. The most important thing is to show that you have savings behind you, or if not savings, enough to fund the bond and the move. So 4 weeks rent or 6 weeks rent, really, because you need to pay 2 weeks.
So that's sort of what they're looking for. Like if you've got, I was going to say, do you need is it better to show 5 grand, 10 grand, 100 grand?
Look, some people don't have that, and that's completely fine. Some people will get a bond loan, which is completely fine. But what we want to show is the ongoing income that you will have, how much that is, so they can see what you have coming in and what they will be taking for rent. So whatever pay slip you get, they want to match that to a bank statement to show, yep, that's gone into his bank statement. It's very easy for someone to just say, well, here's some pay slips I made on Word doc, but we need to see it going into a bank statement. So bank statements and pay slips are crucial in your application. If you've been renting, a tenant ledger is crucial. If you have any rental arrears on your tenant ledger and they were for a reason where your direct debit stopped, you couldn't afford it 1 week, it's better to have that discussion with the agent or with ourselves, just so we can answer that question when we're speaking with an agent. It's better to say, hey, look, in May 2023, I was behind a week. This is my reason why, rather than them making the assumption, oh, she didn't pay rent in May 2023.
You put that in like the description or something?
Yeah, so we do that in the breakdown, or even just a quick conversation, just heaps casual with the agent, because we'd rather just go over that little bit of a hurdle then it impacts the agent, the application, and the agent makes an assumption and then goes to the landlord with that assumption. So part of it is really just coaching the agent on how to present the application to the landlord.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to add on there, that for people to have a look at home, when you get that ledger, I was at my previous rental, I was renting with a flatmate, and we decided that I'd transfer to him and he would pay the rent out of his account. He'd have the direct debit. Very common. One person does it rather than two. And the property management company actually put his name. There was his name. There was obviously another tenant with his name. So they allocated the rent that we were paying against another property. So we were getting we were getting these emails saying you're in arrears, and I'm thinking, is this guy transferring the money or is he pocketing it? Yeah, and it happened like fortnight after fortnight after fortnight, and then they're like, we get these emails saying you're in arrears, and then like all the legal stuff, and then we're like, what's going on? I'm like, man, are you actually paying this or what? And he'd show, and he'd show me, and I'd be like, okay, then what's going on? And then we had to sit down with these guys and say, look, you need to go through your system. One thing, your wires are crossed.
Yeah.
And then I had to make sure as well after I left that property, when I was getting that ledger from the agent, that was none of that on there, because obviously it's none of my fault, right? And if I would have went to the new place I'm at now,
and you didn't look at that or you didn't pick that up, you wouldn't have got a new house.
Yeah, exactly. It was like for the first probably 3-4 months, so it was going to be chaotic. Is there any other tips you have, or any other? You've been a property manager for a while, so is there anything else people can sort of do to put their front foot forward with getting in these rentals or increasing their chances?
Just with the tenant ledgers, if they are in a situation like yours, or they are in a situation where they have been in arrears before, we can also help them and guide them in which way to come out of arrears, like working with them to put a payment plan with the agent and communicating that, because sometimes it does become overwhelming. So another service that we can do is, if they are in a rental arrears and they need guidance on which way and how to approach their agent to come out of arrears, we can also assist them with that. In terms of tips for securing a rental property, what I find is lacking in a lot of people's applications is their references. So people will be like, oh, I'll just put my friend down. I'll just put, HR, who have probably 1,000 emails a day that they need to get through. And when they're submitting their application, their little reference email that gets sent out to the big people in the company aren't being responded to. So what happens is they think their application's done. They've got the big boss to come in and give them a reference. That big boss doesn't do the reference. Their application is slowly tracking down the list. Literally will go to the bottom, because without their references being complete, their application's not being looked at.
Okay, so what's the way around it?
Nobody calls.
It's just like a little verification.
When they submit an application, an email will go directly to their reference. That reference needs to be completed. Once it's completed, your application comes back up, incomplete, complete, pending references.
Is that how you see them on the property manager? Theoretically.
Depending on what program they use. I mean, I've been out of property management for 4 years now.
Yep.
But it would be, waiting for reference with owner, whatever stage it's up to. Yeah. So it's important to make sure that your references aren't just, Bob, the neighbor who does never use an email in 10 years. It's people who are responsive and reactive to their emails who will actually give you a review. It's crucial. If you put in that you make, 100,000 plus commission, your boss needs to know that you make 100K plus commission. Because if they come back and say, oh, no, it's 80, your income on your application is lower. So making sure that your references are responsive, making sure that you've got all the relevant documentation. An agent, if you're against, 60 other applications, for example, and 50 of them don't have the relevant documents, that agent's not going to spend their time calling 50 people for additional documents. They're going to focus on the 10 that have everything because that's enough. So making sure that you've got your documents, your references, and being aware and alert at open homes and even having a conversation with an agent can take your application to the next point. A lot of people that I also have that come through with pensions that technically are unemployed, making sure that your pension or somewhere on your application is noted that you get an income is important because, again, when your application is submitted, it'll say unemployed. Therefore, your income and your affordability is at zero unless you input it in another way. So making sure that you put everything about yourself in your application, you submit it on time. So if you can't submit it before, submit it, if it's a Saturday open home, submit it before Sunday afternoon. That way you can actually get them to the agent before Monday morning.
Be prepped up, ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. All our profiles for our clients are set up, and we are checking every day to make sure we have the updated documents.
Okay, perfect. So then after you go to home, it's boom, straight into it. Do you have to see the property before you apply, right?
So we don't like to let our clients do the sight unseen because it's very easy for an agent to say, yeah, it's a great property. And then you go
There's
in
no
and you're
mold at all.
It smells like damp water, and then, there's water in the walls or there's mold. So
that's a water feature.
It's a water feature, yeah. And they'll probably charge you $300 extra week every week for it. Yeah. But making sure that you inspect is crucial. If we don't inspect it, we make sure our client inspects it. And if they do, if we pre-apply and the agent comes back and says you've been approved, we won't let them go ahead until we view it.
Okay. And what about one of the hardest things is people that are coming out of for potentially the younger audience that are living at home with mum and dad that are then trying to get out and get their first rental. I feel as if they're almost behind the 8 ball because they don't have that tenant history, especially if parents aren't charging the board, them board.
Yeah. So they are normally, I wouldn't say they're behind in any way, but it's more that it's just a bit more competitive for them. They're up against people who have, anywhere from 2 to 15 years, sometimes longer in terms of rental history. And when you say it when it's a single person that comes out of the family home, a first-time renter and a single person up against someone with rental history and in a couple is very difficult. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible. A lot of the time we get references from work, we get references from family, or if their income is not enough, they can put mum or dad on the lease with them for the first year.
Okay.
As a guarantor.
Does the agent see that and sort of know what's happening,
well,
or they wouldn't?
The way that we would present it is we understand the market, we understand the competitiveness, we understand that one income may not be enough. If mum and dad are assisting with them, we would then put them on the lease as well. Sometimes they can just put a guarantor letter in, but it's always better if mum or dad are on the lease. But again, it's circumstances. It depends on their circumstances. So we'll go through that. We'll review their information, review their documentation, and then guide them on which way is best to move forward. But still, we help hundreds of first-time renters.
Yeah, what are some of the numbers? How big is the team? You started in 2020, right?
Yeah, we started in 2020. We are a team of 8 now. That's full-time staff. And then we have all the open home inspectors, which is probably over 30 now.
Okay, and you've got one in every...
I've got multiple in every state
And territory.
Yeah,
and
just
stuff.
on Saturday, I have a lovely girl named Rana. She works with me every Saturday, and she's just out there inspecting. It's full on.
And how many clients would you say you place in a week or a month, or does it vary?
It varies because some people, because we don't have the time limit with how long we work with you, some people are they're panicky, so they come on 3 months before they want a house and they just want to review the market, see what comes up, and then they take it slow. That relaxes them because we ease into it. And then there's others who are like, I need it now. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get it now.
Yeah.
And then we're straight on to property, straight out to open homes, and it's a full-on process. But yeah, I love it. It's great, and it's grown massively in 4 years.
Is there any what's the plans for the future? Is there any expansion plans? Are you going to be partnering in with a mover to help people move?
I work with removalists.
Okay.
I work with cleaners. I work with what do I work with? Like steam cleaners in terms of like carpet cleaning and all that kind of stuff. So I've got a lot of networks and connections that I refer my clients onto. If I was to open it up, I don't think so. I think I have enough on my hands at the moment. But there is plan to expand it internationally and hit a different market.
Jeez, that's going to be a whole nother headache.
Yeah, but it'll be a nice one. It'll be a good one. I mean, I started in 2020, and I started with, as I said, my son was 11 months old. I was working from my mum's dining room table.
That's where all the good ones start, the parents.
Dining room table. I bought, I saved money. I bought a laptop. Funny, I still have that laptop. It still survived, but I've upgraded
Still
to a
kicking?
desktop.
Yeah, okay.
And then I used to, put my son to sleep at 7. I'd work. He'd get up for the 10 o'clock feed, and then a lot of mums will know that, the 10 o'clock feed.
The 10 o'clock feed,
the 10 o'clock feed, and then I would work till 2 o'clock in the morning, because it was me for the first year, and then we had an influencer reach out to work with us, and then it just took off.
To work for you or with you on
to help me. Well, sorry, she needed help to find a house in Sydney. She was in Brisbane.
Yep.
And I said, yeah, sure. Like, it was maybe 6 months into the business, and we were doing low numbers. It was just more word of mouth, and we were focusing on the marketing and getting it out there. And then we worked with a fantastic influencer, and then we a couple of weeks later got into the Brisbane market.
Okay, and that sort of shot you up
It's non-stop.
in the Brisbane
Yeah.
market. Was there any sort of I know you've been across the news and stuff a couple of times. Was there any sort of big light bulb moment with your business growth that, once you were on 7 News and then like overnight things exploded, or it's been sort of steady? Like how's it been?
It's been steady in between those interviews and things that I've done in the media.
Yep.
But it was one where Channel 7 News took me to Brisbane and did an interview, and I remember I took my sister along with me, and I was like, this is the first interview I'd done on TV, and I was so nervous on the plane. It's only an hour plane ride. I was shitting myself. And obviously we had to go straight from the airport to the interview. So I was full face of makeup, 7 o'clock in the morning on a flight out of Sydney to Melbourne and ready. And by the time I got there, I was sweating. So I was like to my sister, we need to go and get a day hotel room so I could fix myself up. And then it was, we did Channel 7 News Brisbane. And then after that, it was just inquiry. But that particular news interview then went around Australia. So it hit Perth, it hit Melbourne, I think it hit Sydney, and then it did the Gold Coast as well. So it was constant traction.
And then it just went
inquiry,
from there.
And then it's every time, obviously, you get that little bit of news, or when I'm on Triple M, I do Triple M with Luke Boner on
night shift too?
Night shift, night shift. I do that on some Sundays. That just, people hear it, and they hear that there's someone out there that can help the tenants.
And they flick it too.
Yeah.
That's why I had you on. One thing a couple of things before we wrap up, but mindset.
Yes.
And your sort of beliefs and why you're working really hard. You're doing a lot of hours. What's your mindset? What's your philosophy with, I think I get a vibe from you. I don't want to put it out there, but I want to, what's your mindset? What's your thoughts in the business and working as hard as you do? No, I mean, you're putting your son to sleep at 7. You're working through to 2 a.m. Why are you doing it? Why don't you this is all too hard. You're going back to property management.
I do it for my son, and so I can be a present mum and a boss woman at the same time, and have that flexibility of life and enjoying things and a bit more control. If I was in a 9 to 5 and my son was sick, I'd be putting out the business of the who I work for, and I wanted to have that freedom in terms of life and what I want to buy and what I want to do and where I want to travel and what I can provide for my son. And I said, well, nobody's going to give it to me, so I need to get out there and get it myself. Right. And that's what I've done.
Perfect, because I feel like it's you and him against the world,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I get this vibe from you that you're just working hard, and you know that he's 4 now and he doesn't
Yeah.
understand.
Oh,
what.
he says to me, Mum, you go smash your interviews. You're the rent fairy. So when I was in the news, the whole daycare watched me live on
No
TV.
way, that's so
and
cool.
he knows that I'm the rent fairy. So
Yeah.
if you ask him, what does your mum do for work? He says she's the rent fairy. And he full knows. He will take videos because obviously he sees me on the mic quite a bit. He sees me in interviews.
Yep.
He will say, hey guys, my mum's the rent fairy and she can find you a house wherever you want. Like, it's very on the
I've
ball.
interviewed the wrong person.
Yeah, you should have interviewed
Oh, I
Jordan.
should have got him on.
He's the best.
And to wrap up, what's a quote you live your life by?
The quote that I live my life by is, it's not what has happened to me, it is what I choose to become.
Love it.
Yeah.
Sarah Elkordi from The Rent Fairy, thank you so much for coming out on the Everything Property Podcast.
Thank you.
It's been great.